So I'm blown away that you have all these letters. And I notice that some of them are addressed to S.J. Lapporte and some of them are addressed to S.P. Lapporte.
Okay.
What's up with that?
She used to call me Sweet Potato. So SP is Sweet Potato.
Wow. This is amazing.
You know, this was her.
Well, what's amazing about it is I'm 56 years old and I never knew these existed.
Well, I'm not sure I should have shared these with you when you were 12.
No, probably not
You-
12. But this is incredible, Dad.
Yeah,
that all these
okay.
are here. And it is a testament to, I mean, she was clearly into you. That's what this is showing me.
Yeah.
So I also noticed that some of these are addressed to you in Berkeley, and some of them are addressed to you in
Okay.
Amsterdam
Okay, so
and
this,
Paris.
so let's clarify that. So she takes off with this $10,000 inheritance and visits all over Europe and however far the money would take her. She kept telling me, why don't you come to Paris or come to London? It would be so nice to have you here and all that. And she was pleading with me to come. So I went ahead and made plans to surprise her and meet her, I think, in London
And you're communicating this back and forth
by
in
mail.
emails.
There is no telephone, there is no internet, there's none of that stuff. So I finally make my plans and prepay for the hotels I was staying. And I tell her, okay, I'm coming to meet you in London. And she says, no, don't come. So she changes her mind completely.
After you'd made all your travel
After I
plans.
had made all these reservations at the hotels and to put on deposits and all that. So she says, don't come.
Wait a second. So you made all these plans to go to Europe,
Yeah,
and then she sends you a letter, don't come.
yeah, don't come. So, I said, well, all my plans are made. The hotel reservations have deposits on them. I'm not even sure, I can get out. So I said, I tell you what, I'm flying from San Francisco to Chicago, and then on a Thursday, and I'm leaving Sunday for London. If you're coming back to the United States, why don't you route yourself, I think, from Paris to Chicago and Chicago to San Francisco? And she said, wonderful. And that's what she did. And that's the first time she met my family, really.
So she was flying back from Europe with all of her stuff from Europe, however long. How long was she in Europe? How long was she gone for on that $10,000?
Like probably April, May, March, April, May, June, July, probably 4 months.
So she was in flitting around Europe for 4 months.
Yep.
And obviously writing a lot of letters.
Yep.
And you were writing back roughly half as many letters.
Yep.
And then you guys sort of passed in the night.
Passed in the night, and we arranged to meet in Chicago. My parents were very impressed with Anne, but Esther fell in love with her. Now she's gone back to San Francisco, and she's found a place to live on Gough Street, an apartment. But now I'm in Europe.
And she obviously continued to write you letters at your
Obviously,
various hotels.
Yeah.
This one is to the Madison Hotel in Paris to
Yep.
Mr. Seymour J. Laporte.
Yep.
Not Sweet Potato Laporte.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
That's an amazing story, Dad.
Yeah.
So clearly love is building. There's energy here.
Oh, yeah. And when I was in Copenhagen, I bought her a gift, a very nice gold watch. I'm not sure I intended it as an engagement gift or anything, but it turned out to be that way.
So you are in Europe. You're undoubtedly thinking about her. You're getting these letters all the time.
I'm getting
You're
these
buying
letters.
gifts.
Now she's met my parents. I haven't met her parents yet.
Okay.
She had been very careful about not introducing me to her parents.
Why do you think that was?
I think probably her father or her mother or both of them, lived in a very fancy apartment on the 9th floor of the Brockle Bank, and were worried about gold diggers trying to, find her daughter and move in on her.
Okay. So
On the other hand, I did meet, probably shortly after I came back from Europe, before I met her parents, we went over to Alan and Barbara at Berkeley.
okay.
And I met Alan and Barbara, and they seemed like nice people, ordinary people, but I had met them. And I'm sure that, as soon as Barbara and Alan met me, they were on the phone
With Becky and David,
with Becky and David.
saying, "Here comes a gold digger.
Yeah.
Watch out."
Yeah.
So things are starting to get serious. You're meeting her relatives.
Yeah.
So now she's living in San Francisco. You're in Berkeley. You're still seeing each other regularly.
So now it's like the end of August. And
1963.
Anne mentions to me casually, we saw each other Friday or Saturday or something like that. And she said, I'm going to have dinner with my parents Monday night, and I'll tell them about you. Okay, fine, And I was home, actually with a couple of guys talking or doing something, and the phone rings, and it's Anne. She's with she's at her parents. They've just had dinner, and Anne is calling me and saying, telling me about dinner and all that.
She's calling you from
She's
their
calling
apartment.
me from David's apartment
Okay.
and says, wait, my father wants to talk to you. First time I had ever spoken to the man. I had never met him. So I I'm on the phone, and his very first words were Mazel and Bracha, which I figured, Mazel and Bracha is good luck, and you have my blessing.
Wow. So what she said to her parents,
Apparently, she said, this is
the one.
This is the one. And so, I chatted, he wished me Mazel and Bracha, and I was polite or something. It was a very short conversation, and then I put Anne back on, and basically the point of the conversation was for the four of us, Becky, David, Anne, and I, to have dinner with them the following Friday night.
So they invited you
They invited me
to San Francisco.
to meet them and to have dinner.
Okay. And you accepted graciously on the
And
phone.
of course I did, and I cleaned myself up. And
Were you nervous?
I don't think I was as nervous as David was. Anyway, I cleaned myself up. I went into I went to the Frankel Bank, and I was very impressed by it. There was a doorman and a parking lot, and I told him I was
A parking lot, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
a courtyard.
I remember.
Yeah. And I told him I was there to see Mr. and Mrs. Frankel, of course. Then he took me up in the elevator to the ninth floor, and I think there were two apartments on each floor, so they had a big, like a 3-bedroom apartment with a commanding view of San Francisco. And she introduces me to her parents, very, very nice. And we chatted and all that. And then Becky grabs Anne and says, "Excuse us." And they deliberately go into the bedroom, and now David and I are there alone. And I think he was more uncomfortable than I was. But, he asked me, what I did and how long I had been with Chevron and my background and all that. And I assured him that I was, solid and I was making a good salary and this was a career position and I had been with Chevron. I think that meant a lot to him. 56, 64. I had been with Chevron for 8 years. So, and at that point, he was sort of working for a stockbroker, Stone and Youngberg.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he knew about San Francisco and the San Francisco community and Chevron's reputation. So I probably...
You passed the test. You would have been bigger.
I probably passed the test. And
what were your impressions of David when you first met him?
A fine, distinguished gentleman. He spoke, clearly. And David, he was a British colonial. He didn't grow up in the shtetl or something. He was a gentleman.
So then Anne and Becky came back from the bedroom.
Anne and Becky came out and rescued us and and said, let's go down for dinner. And we walked across the street to Alexis Tangier, which is on Mason and California, just a block away, just below, I think, the Mark Hopkins Hotel. And obviously David and Becky were well known there, the maitre d'. Oh, hello, Mr. Frankel, how are you? Mrs. Frankel, how are you? David had forgotten my name by that time. So when the maitre d' comes over, he says, this is my friend, this is my daughter, Anne, and her young man.
There seems to be a lot of that. You were sweet potato in these letters,
but we had a nice dinner, and then shortly after that, things started to move very quickly. So I had the family blessing. There was no question that I was acceptable and accepted. So they invited me into their circle. I guess one evening, a week or a couple of weeks later, Esther and Lester Goodman, who lived on the penthouse of the Mark Hopkins, had a little cocktail party for us. And it was catered and lovely, and all the Klumeks were there. The whole family was there to check me out, and I obviously must have passed.
But you were not engaged yet officially.
No, I never was engaged.
What do you mean you never were engaged? You're meeting the family, they're throwing cocktail parties.
I guess I had given her, when I got back from Copenhagen, I gave her this watch. But I hadn't bought an engagement ring or anything like that. And I don't remember getting on my knees and asking her to marry me. As a matter of fact, the first time I heard of it was, I think, about the same time I had this conversation with David and said, what are you going to do this weekend or something like that? And I said, well, I was thinking of going to Gemco and get a Waring blender because I'd like to be able to make cocktails, gin fizzes and margaritas and stuff like that. And she said, well, don't do that. We'll probably get one of those as a wedding gift. So I think that was,
So things just progressed.
I think things just progressed.
Did you ever give her an engagement ring?
No, she didn't want one. And then when it came time to choosing a wedding ring, Auntie Esther knew a manufacturing jeweler on Post Street in San Francisco, and we went up to see him, and Anne chose a simple band of gold diamonds with Florentine gold guards, and that was a sort of combination wedding and engagement ring.
So you go from not buying a blender to planning a wedding.
That's right. And as a matter of fact, I think during the Chevron at that time, about at that exact time, I was teaching a course to Chevron Chemical on chemistry in San Francisco on Bush Street. And I remember meeting Anne for lunch many, many days. And we'd go and choose what we wanted in terms of silverware and china and the things you do, and made those choices, and that was kind of cool.
So when you would take a break from work, you would go have lunch, and you would
Yeah,
go to
we'd meet at Zellerbach
Macy's or
Plaza.
whatever.
As a matter of fact, I think we'd get takeout sandwiches, or she would bring takeout sandwiches, and we would go to V.C. Morris and Gump's and City of Paris and make our selections.
Amazing. So I know this, and eventually November of 1964 rolls around. So tell us about the wedding.
So I guess we had agreed to get married.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, the Waring blender pretty much did it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably the point of no return. And I guess Anne and David and I, less so me, because they were funding it pretty much. So so they made wedding plans. They reserved what we decided to have is we would get married in David and Becky's apartment on the 9th floor of the Brockle Bank. And Becky called in a florist, and he created an arbor of white roses or something as a kind of symbolic chuppah. And we arranged, at that time I didn't belong to a synagogue, so David arranged, they belonged to Emmanuel, but didn't go there very often, but I guess he knew the Chazan Emeritus, Reuben Rinder, a fine gentleman, and he asked Reuben would he marry us, and he agreed after and Reuben Rinder invited Anne and I to his home for tea and cake, and we kind of talked. Do you plan to have children? Do you plan to raise them, Jewishly? all the right questions and all the right answers. And then pretty much David and Becky more than David, and I'm sure with assistance from Auntie Esther and everyone else, arranged for an orchestra and everything else.
Wow. So it's November 15th, 1964.
November 15th, 1964.
You go to David and Becky's apartment.
The evening before, my parents, and I think Sadie and Nettie and my brother and sister came in. And I think the Frankels had a dinner at a place in the marina, a very nice place, just the immediate family, David, Becky, everyone from Chicago, my brother and sister, but not Serena and not Irving. They didn't show up until the wedding.
Serena and Irving are Mom's sister and brother-in-law.
Correct.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the wedding. You got married with a very small wedding party in an apartment.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is, so now my parents show up for the wedding, and Cantor Rinder is there, and we introduce my father. This is Cantor Rinder. He's the Cantor Emeritus of Temple Emmanuel. So my father kind of challenged his authority to marry his son. I mean, this guy wasn't a rabbi even, but Cantor Rinder was very sympathetic and assured him that he was ordained and that he had married many people and he wrote Hebrew. So my father signed off on the ketubah. And the wedding was held, and it was mercifully brief, and there were hors d'oeuvres served and champagne. And again, the immediate family, Laverne Kane, who hasn't been introduced in this thing yet, was one of Anne's bridesmaids. The other was Libby Fisk, an old friend of Anne's, and my brother served as my best man. And after this brief interlude of wedding and champagne, we simply took the elevator downstairs to the Fairmont Hotel and went into the Gold Room, which was a huge room. And there was like 150 people were invited, probably 125 San Franciscans, Becky and David's people, and 25 of my colleagues from Chevron and immediate family. And so there was this enormous receiving line that seemed to take forever to get through. And meanwhile, the band was playing and people were dancing, and I think the buffet had opened up, and it was very elegant, oysters and lobsters and clams, none of which my Orthodox Jewish parents ate, and a carving, roast beef and turkey.
Very elegant.
Very, very elegant. The receiving line's finally over. Becky grabs Anne and I and says, "Cut the cake and get out of here." Or have a dance, have the first dance, cut the cake and get out of here. So we actually never ate of this elegant buffet. We cut the cake, she gave us a bottle of champagne, and we left the Fairmont Hotel.
With all the guests hanging out there.
Of course, and every 2 weeks later, people told us how wonderful the reception was, and how incredible the food was, and the music was wonderful, and it was terrific. Best wedding they had ever been to, except that we weren't there.
You didn't experience it.
We didn't experience it.
So where did you go on your honeymoon?
Auntie Esther arranged, I think, the first night we left the wedding, the Fairmont, at like 9 o'clock at night. So we drove down to a hotel in Palo Alto that had just opened up. I don't even know if it's there anymore, but very, very nice hotel. And I promptly dropped the bottle of champagne in the lobby and it broke. But I think for our wedding dinner, when now it's midnight and we still haven't eaten, and I think we called the room service and they were shut down. But someone said, well, I can get you apple pie and coffee. So I think that's what we had for our wedding dinner.
Apple pie and coffee.
Yep. And then we drove down to the Ojai Valley Country Club. And
is that something you arranged?
It was November now, November 15th, sort of off season. The days are very short. So I think Auntie Esther arranged that, and we were there for a couple of nights or something. And then the plan was to drive on to Palm Springs. And it was sort of interesting, so we drive down Highway 101, and it turns out it's snowing over the pass. What's that?
El Cajon. El Cajon Pass?
El Cajon, or the Tejon Pass. And there's a blizzard. And fortunately, I had chains in the car, so I was able to put on chains. And the police were telling the roads are closed. Get off the roads. So we started looking for a motel, and we in Palmdale. And I remember one guy saying it was like a truck stop, and the guy said, well, the only thing we have left are 2 beds and a 10-man dormitory. So I did think that was for us.
That's not appropriate.
So we drove on further through this blizzard to a motel at the edge of town where they had a shabby room, but it was at least out of the snow and wind. There was, I think, a king-size bed that took up virtually the whole room. So to go to the bathroom, we had to crawl across the bed into the bathroom. The television set was hanging from the ceiling. Very small room, but it was warm and safe. And the next day, the sun came out, and we built a snowman, and we drove on to Palm Springs.
You built a snowman.
Yep.
So all that romance,
Yep.
The Chez Marguerite with the French music and the escargot and things like that, quickly gave way to a Fleabag motel outside of Palmdale.
That's the real world. That was the beauty of it, because Anne was up. She was up for everything.
Pond 5. Pond 5.